Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's your Kiwi Connection here, Cam07, and today we have Sapphires R9 290 against Gigabytes Windforce R9 290. So these cards are pretty similar. If you've seen them before in my previous videos, they're both triple fan designs. They both look kind of similar design-wise, and color-wise they're very different. But yeah, quite similar in design and quite similar in size, so I think that's where I'm going to start. So these cards are pretty close, but the Tri-X is slightly longer, only by a few millimeters. Yeah, so the Gigabyte card comes in at 294 millimeters long, and the Tri-X comes in at 305 millimeters long. So there's a little bit of difference there, but keep in mind also that the Gigabyte card's a little bit wider and a little bit taller than the Tri-X. So the Tri-X is a bit longer, but the Gigabyte card's a little bit fatter. So that's about the only difference in terms of dimensions with these two cards. As I've said before, though, both these cards are quite long compared to normal video cards. So if you have a smaller case, once again, you might need to take that into consideration, but any mid tower should be able to fit it. You might just have to remove a hard drive cage. Now these cards are obviously very similar. They both got the Hawaii 28nm GPU in it, slightly cut down version of the 290X GPU. But the only really differences between them is the speeds. So the GPU on the Windforce is set at 1040 megahertz, and the GPU on the Tri-X is set at 1000. And there's also a bit of a difference with the memory clock, with the Windforce having the same as the reference model 5000 megahertz memory clock, and the Tri-X a little bit bumped up at 5200 megahertz. So there's a bit of a difference there. Now we'll get straight into what everyone wants to see, the benchmarks. So a few people commented that I only did synthetic benchmarks, so I've added in 2 more benchmarks that I'll keep for all my next reviews and that down the road. So I added Tomb Raider and Bioshock Infinite, 2 games that I quite like, and also they got good graphics, so and both games were maxed out. So I've added those in. But what we're going to start with is Furmark. So in Furmark, the Windforce did actually pretty good. It scored 37 frames per second, and the Tri-X got 35 frames per second. Now this is running my user benchmark 1080p 4x MSAA, full screen 15 minutes. So it's pretty close, about 2 frames. So as I said, I mean, don't expect there to be much variance. I mean, this is going to be pretty close. It's just a battle of slightly higher GPU speed or slightly higher memory speed. Next on to Unigine Valley. This is on the Extreme HD preset. The Windforce card scored 60.7 frames per second, and the Tri-X scored 58.8, so about 2 frames there again. Now on to Unigine Heaven 4.0. So I did 2 tests in this, one in DirectX 11, the other in OpenGL. Now this is everything maxed out on both of them. And the Windforce scored 53.7 on the DirectX 11, and the Tri-X scored 52.1. So we're a little bit closer that time. On OpenGL, once again in Heaven, the Windforce scored 38.3, and the Tri-X scored 37.2. So you're starting to see a pattern. It's pretty close. Now onto Tomb Raider. So this is everything maxed out, obviously VSync off, and we scored 79.9 FPS on the Windforce card and 78.1 on the Tri-X. So once again, about 2 frames. And last one up, Bioshock Infinite. This is again everything maxed out. The Windforce card scored 115.8 average FPS, and the Tri-X scored 113.9. So as you can see through all the tests, it's about 2 frames. as I said before, that's just take that with a grain of salt. If you're gonna overclock, that pretty much doesn't matter anyways, because you're gonna be bumping up all these speeds, so your results are gonna vary massively. But if you're someone that's not going to overclock, then just keep this in mind that picking the Windforce over the Tri-X, you're only going to gain about 2 frames per second, which isn't really going to make any difference. Now let's get on to temperatures. So this temperatures and noise is what I said is going to be the really interesting one, and it was. So I was expecting these cards to actually be very similar in terms of temperatures, and I was actually quite surprised. So when I did my Firmark test, the maximum temperature I saw out of the Windforce was 84 degrees. So that's getting quite toasty. I mean, I know the reference card will run up to 95 degrees, so it's obviously a lot better than that. However, that's still pretty toasty. The Tri-X, on the other hand, ran to 79 max. Now, that's only 5 degrees difference, but the main difference here is that the Gigabyte card went up to 70% fan speed, and it was holding at 84 degrees at 70%. The Tri-X, on the other hand, only went to 46% fan speed, and it was holding at 79. So that's a big difference right there. I mean, that's a lot of room left in the Tri-X. I mean, if you want to make real aggressive fan curves, I mean, it's going to cool a lot better. So I was pretty surprised to see that. I also took temperatures in the Heaven 4.0 benchmark I was doing, DirectX 11, and the max I saw in that with the Windforce was 78 degrees Celsius, again with quite high fan speeds, and with the Tri-X it was 74, so once again about 4 or 5 degrees less, but much lower fan speed. So I can tell already that the noise-wise the Tri-X was much better, but I'll let you judge for yourself. So here we have the two cards, both at idle. And here we have both of the cards. This was during my Valley benchmark. So there's quite a bit of difference in the noise, so I definitely say the Tri-X wins in noise. So that leaves me overall, which one do I think's better? So the Windforce is slightly faster, about 2 frames per second. Once again, if you're overclocking, that isn't going to matter. If you're not overclocking, I wouldn't even take that into consideration really. 2 frames is nothing. The Tri-X is actually much quieter though, and that's something you should take into consideration. It's quieter, and it's cooler, and it does all of that at obviously lower fan speeds, which is really good. So it's quieter and cooler, and that's the big point I want to make here. So if I had to pick a winner out of these two, I'd say it has to go the Tri-X. The cooler is much better and it's much quieter as a card, so that's the card I would personally suggest. However, if you have watched my Power Color PCS Plus card versus 290 versus the Tri-X, you'll realize that I favored the Power Color card over the Tri-X. So as far as all the 290s I've tried so far, I would still have to say the Power Color card, although it is a beast, would be the best of the bunch, in my personal opinion. But everyone, there's other reviewers out there, so check it out before you go out and buy one. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, hope it was informative, and I'll catch you guys next time.